Where's the abomination of desolation? Have you heard of that expression before? It's in the book of Daniel. The abomination that lays waste, the abomination that desolates, established in the set-apart place. Well, where is the set-apart place today? Is it a temple, a structure, a man-made structure, a tabernacle? Where is the set-apart place today? And where is the abomination of desolation? We're going to look at these things today, and it's going to take an unlikely turn because, well, let's go into it and I'll show you. Where is the abomination of desolation in the set-apart place? Where is it? Where is it? You can see here by the picture, it was once in the temple. This is where the abomination of desolation was considered to be, in the temple. Where is the temple today? There's your clue. But first we want to continue with what Moses has been talking about. And we talked about the reverence that is required of each and every person in Yahushua's bride. The reverence, the seriousness, the fear we should be operating with. Not fear because Yahushua is cruel or anything, but fear because we don't want to upset him because of the way we feel. You're doing it to yourself, really. The way we feel when we're rebuked, chastised, flogged, disciplined. When he turns his back on us, we don't want to endure that. It's horrible. So let's look at this abomination. First, we're going to go into the feasts a little bit today. The feasts of 𝗓𝗓𝗄 are central, not only to 𝗓𝗓𝗄's worship practices, but to establishing their identity as a people of Yahushua. The 7 scriptural feasts are among what Yahushua calls his appointed times, Moedim. And these are cyclical. These are cyclical events based on the calendar that Yahushua has established, in order that 𝗓𝗓𝗄 would have cause to pause and reflect on just who they are and who their Elohim is. 3 times a year the Hebrews were to make a pilgrimage, a journey to the location of the central sanctuary in order to present themselves before Yahushua on those occasions. Since Yahushua's presence was seen as residing above the Ark of the Blood Covenant Witness, then to present oneself to Yahushua meant that one must come to the location of the Ark, which of course was the tabernacle and later the temple. And later the temple looked pretty much like that, particularly the one in Herod's temple. But today the temple looks like this above. And what's in the temple? That's the key. We're talking about the feasts right now because that's what Moses is talking about in Deuteronomy. We're going into chapter 16. But I want to take a different slant on it because we've done stacks and stacks of videos about the feasts and about what 𝗓𝗓𝗄 was to do at the feast. I think we all know what 𝗓𝗓𝗄 was supposed to do at the feast, in the wilderness, the tabernacle, when they went into the land. I think we all know what they were supposed to do at the tabernacle and at the feasts back then. But today, everybody's a bit confused about what we're supposed to do today. So anyway, let's go to the text. Just keep in mind this whole idea of abomination behavior while we go on. Passover. Moses says, people of Yisrael, you must guard the Passover and celebrate it in the month of Abib, because in that month many years ago, Yahuwah your Elohim rescued you from Egypt. The Passover sacrifice must be a cow, sheep, goat, and you must offer it at the place where Yahuwah chooses to rest his name, which is the tabernacle, which of course is us. Eat all of the meat of that, which shows you don't have to go anywhere, because the tabernacle, they had to go to the tabernacle, didn't they? They had to pilgrimage to the tabernacle. We don't have to pilgrimage, do we? We're right here. Go to the place where you find yourself. I'm right here. I can celebrate right here. You are the tabernacle. Eat all of the meat of the Passover sacrifice the same night and don't serve any bread made with yeast. Instead, bake the same thin bread that you ate when you were slaves suffering in Egypt and when you had to leave Egypt quickly. As long as you live, this unleavened bread will remind you of the day you left Egypt. For 7 days following the Passover, don't make any bread with yeast. In fact, there should be no yeast anywhere in Yisrael. Does that mean you don't eat yeast? Are you looking at the shadow? What does that mean though to us today? Because we're not into bread. But when we eat bread, it's not a big deal. Eat flat bread, eat paleo bread, eat gluten-free bread, eat all, you know, whole grain bread, eat puffed bread, you know, pita bread, you know, eat whatever bread you want, Italian bread, Turkish bread, any bread you want. It's not a big deal to us, is it? In this 21st century, you know, age of lavish foods and everything. So what does it mean? Yeast is disobedient behavior, puffed up, arrogant, false teachings. That's what we should be looking at. Not about bread. Come on. It's not about bread, it's about behavior. But if you're just doing the bread bit, it's abomination. You're not understanding the point. You're trying to live like they did 4,000 years ago. No, it's not about bread. It's about a behavior. Don't offer the Passover sacrifice in just any town where you happen to live, for it must be offered at the place where it must be offered at the place where Yahuwah chooses to rest his name. Where's that? It's in you if you've been immersed in his name. You are the place he's chosen to rest his name, written it on your forehead. That is where you celebrate the Passover. So if you lived under a bridge and had no home, you could still celebrate because you are the tabernacle. I hope that you don't live like that, but it doesn't matter where or who with. You have everything you need in your vessel, the portal and the carcass, and you can do it. Kill the sacrifice at sunset, the time of day when you left Egypt, then cook it and eat it there at the tabernacle, returning to your tents the next day, the next morning. Eat unleavened bread for the next 6 days, then on the 7th day don't do any work. Don't do any work. Instead, come together for a final celebration to Yahuwah. Now it is a high Shabbat, so you take the day off, you rest, because that's what a high Shabbat is. A Shabbat is an appointed time, a moedim, a time when something's going to happen. Remember the whole time and space thing? We've got the space, we are the tabernacle. The time is every 7th day, and the high Shabbat is 7 times a year, yeah? So we take the day off work and we rest. Or, you know, if you know a few people that are genuine believers in Yahusha, come together and have a bit of a nosh up. That's it. You observe the time. You don't have to do all these rituals. That's for them. Today, all of these rituals actually all these rituals are pieces of the puzzle that join together to transform and fulfill into what Yahusha did on the torture stake, and then when he rose and went back into the dimension, high dimension, so and filled us with his ruach, you know. So let's go on. That was Passover. So it's simple, Passover, come together, Passover. Pentecost or Shabuath. 7 weeks after you start your grain harvest, go to the place where Yahuwah chooses to rest his name and celebrate the harvest festival of weeks in honor of Yahuwah your Elohim. First fruits, which is a shadow of Yahusha's resurrection. So are you going to go and, okay, in order to do this, what's the text say? 7 weeks after you start your grain. Oh, darling, we've got to start planting grain, because we can't do this if we don't harvest grain. That's what the text says, isn't it? That's what we're doing. We're only doing what the text says. We're not looking for any, you know, inspiration or what Yahusha wants us to do today. Let's just do what the text says. Text says you have to harvest grain. I guess we've got to harvest grain. And then we've got to go to the place where Yahuwah chooses to rest his name. I guess we'll have to go and find a tabernacle or a synagogue somewhere. No! I'm being stupid, obviously. But this is how people think, without the Ruach, without Yahusha's spirit, telling them the truth of all this. So, nothing to do with any of that. This is how they lived. They were agricultural people, so he used the agricultural times and seasons to bring them together 7 times a year. But we can still come together 7 times a year. So, bring Yahuwah an offering as large as you can afford, depending on how big a harvest he's given you. Be sure to take along your sons and daughters and all your servants, and invite the poor, including the Levites, foreigners, orphans and widows. Don't forget that you used to be slaves in Egypt too, so Obey these instructions. Yeah? That's Pentecost. Booths. We're coming into booths in a month or so. Trumpets, atonement and booths. So I'll bring all this up again in a month or so, but as we have to every year, because people are just too busy looking at the text on the page, instead of gleaning from Yahushua's voice while they're reading it. After you've finished the grain and grape harvest, got to plant some grapes too, I guess. Take your sons and daughters and all your servants to the place where Yahuwah chooses to rest his name. And celebrate the festival of booths for 7 days. Also, invite the poor, including Levites, foreigners, orphans and widows. Yahuwah will give you big harvests and make you successful in everything you do if you guard his instructions and obediently do them. Oh, we want to be blessed, so we've got to do what these instructions say. They're written here for us, we've got to do them. Yes, they are written here as types and shadows and examples and behavioural, everything for us. But you've got to use your noggin, guys. We live in 21st century planet Earth. You know, you've got to look at it and go, okay, I've got Yahushua in my heart, a portal doorway connection with him. How do you want me to observe this? Because I don't think I do have to do all this stuff. I'm not an agricultural person. So what should I do? It's not about any of this stuff he's saying. It's all the behaviour today. That's why we're in a behaviour revolution. And you will be completely happy. Why? If you guard his instructions and obediently do them, you will be completely happy. So celebrate this festival in honour of Yahuwah your Elohim. Each year there are 3 festivals when all Yisraelite men must go to the place where Yahuwah chooses to be worshipped. There's a lot of th's in here, isn't there? Take out all these th's. The Yahuwah. When all the Yisraelite men must go to the place where Yahuwah chooses to be worshipped. 3 times a year, Passover, Pentecost, booths. All your males must appear before Yahuwah your Elohim at the tabernacle, and don't forget to take along a gift for Yahuwah. The bigger the harvest that Yahuwah gives you, the bigger your gift should be. So that's the text we're reading from today in Deuteronomy. And I just found it fascinating, the articles that came up around the same time that I was researching this, because I had pages and pages and pages of explaining and commentaries about each of the feasts and dissecting them, and then I'm just so bored. I'm so bored with it. How many more videos do we have to make about what Yisrael had to do back then and what they meant and the shadows and how much Yahushua fulfilled them all? You know, I think I've covered it in all the videos that regard the feast now, and I'll post them at the bottom. You know, I just got rid of all that information off the page and I went, I want something fresh. So this is where we're going today, guys. We're not even going to talk about the feasts very much. We're going to talk about every day of the year, because Yahushua wants to gain back his set apart property every day of the year. Not just on the 7th day, not just 7 times a year at the feast. Every day he wants the victory in his set apart property, which is your vessel. Yeah? Today in the 21st century, the bride of Yahushua needs to know that her behaviour in observing the feasts of Yisrael are an abomination to Yahushua, because they're always focusing on themselves. Always focusing on themselves. They want to do what they see the church doing, what the Messianics doing, what the Jews doing in Orthodox Judaism. Oh, well, we've got the truth. We know the name of Yahushua. Why can't we have a celebration and do we can come together and do, these are going to be our little rituals. And look, they're written in scripture so we can do them. Yahushua's like, I don't care what your rituals are. You're doing just what religion does. You just added my name to it, which is even worse. So let's look at the self, because this is what's got to go. Let's go deeper. Let's just get rid of this surface conversation about the feasts and bread and wine and trumpets and shofars and all this stuff that's bubby talk. Let's go into the self. Do you really want to talk about yours? We all love talking about ourselves, don't we? Do you want to really talk about the self? The self? The ego? What does self mean in Hebrew? To bore. So boring listening to someone talk about themselves, isn't it? Boring. That's not this bore, this is a bore. To bore, like bore a hole. To bore, wound, dissolve, profane a person, place or thing. That's what the self does. Profanes a person, place or thing. So if you're bringing yourself to a feast, yourself to a gathering, yourself to a congregation, conversation, if you're bringing yourself to a conversation all the time, what are you doing to it? You're profaning it. To break one's word, to begin, defile, break, take inheritance, pipe, player and instruments, pollute, polluting it. We pollute we pollute the atmosphere, we pollute the air of the room we walk into by our looks and our glances and our opinions and our mindset, maybe even our smell. We profane, self-prostitute. There you go. Slay, slain, sorrow, stain, wound. The self is a wicked thing within us. The self is a wicked thing within us, which the world calls a soul. That's what the world calls a soul. No such thing as a soul. We don't have body, soul and spirit. We only have body and spirit. Outward and inward. So religious views on the self. Religious views on the self vary widely. The self is a complex and core subject in many forms of spirituality. In Western psychology, the concept of self comes from Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Carl Rogers, where the self is the inner critique. The inner critique. Some Eastern philosophies reject the self as a delusion. In Buddhist psychology, the attachment to self is an illusion that serves as the main cause of suffering and unhappiness. Well, that's true. But Paul explains to us in Romans 6 how the self must be put on the altar of sacrifice so that it will die. The self must be put on the altar of sacrifice so that it will die. You've been immersed into the sufferings of Yahushua. You're following into the death with him, going to the death just like he did. So the self must be put on the altar of sacrifice that it will die, and that we are no longer living for ourselves. This is what Paul's saying. We are no longer living for ourselves, but for Yahushua and his instructions, which must become our new behavior. Many believers are not making the full transition and are keeping the behaviors of the world in their conduct. The behavior of the world could be religious world, because the world and religion is the same thing. Yeah? So you can be looking at the world and be religious worldliness as well. What they do in assemblies, what they do on the evangelist channels. Oh, I might do that when we get together next time. Yeah, why? It's dead, it's boring, it's been done by someone else. When you come together, you shouldn't have a plan. You should, unless it's just to plan the food, but you should just, go with the flow. Go with Yahushua and what he's going to say and bring up in conversation. And it comes from people being genuine and honest and wanting to discuss. So many believers are not making the full transition and are keeping behaviors of the world in their conduct. This causes great confusion and is not a witness of the truth of the word. Those behaving a mixed conduct will be left knocking on the door and will be punished, because Yahushua wants a genuine bride, one who is sold over to him. And yes, there is a great difference in attitude and behavior from the true believers to those of the disobedience. There's a big difference. You can see it out of your eyes, whether people are standing in front of you or whether you're seeing people, believers online. You can see it through your eyes, the behavior. And no, we are not judging, because Scripture says to discern the spirits, because Timothy says, or Paul says to Timothy, you can be certain that in the last days there will be some extremely hard times, for people will love only themselves and money. People will love only themselves and money. They will be proud, stuck up, rude, and disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, wicked, heartless, and hatefully fierce. Their words will be cruel, and they will have no self-control or pity. These people will hate everything that is good. They'll be sneaky, reckless, puffed up with pride. Instead of loving Yahushua, they will love only entertainment and pleasure. And even though they will often make a religious song and dance, pretending to be reverent and obedient, it's just fake. For there's no power there. So don't have anything to do with such people. Don't have anything to do with such people. So, now is Yahushua telling us to judge those with such behaviour? Certainly not. We don't know what Yahushua's doing in them. He does say to stay away from them though. But if we observe such behaviour, he told us to turn away from these and don't mix with them. So if we are in the company of such behaviour, including those who say they are believers, but have behaviours that are as above, it is most dangerous for us. We have to die to such behaviour. We have to die to such behaviour. Our old self must die on the stake and share in the death of Messiah. Did you know that's why you got immersed? To partake of the death and suffering of Yahushua. So that, as it says, so that just as he rose in newness of life, we shall one day do the same. Yahushua hates wicked behaviours, and this is the difference between his real chosen. Those wicked behaviours, he hates them. So there's some examples there of what that scripture is talking about. The death of the ego will be the beginning of your real life. Your death, if you want to have real life, those who give up their life, such as it is, filthy rags and the filth it is, will receive life. So this self, this thing that we walk around in, this thing that we're in, the self has to die. And we love the self. We love all of our things that we find pleasant and memorable and nostalgic. We love it. And we've brought it into our feasts, into our worship. We've brought in many. I haven't now because I've come out of it all. And the people that I gather with, we've all come out of that. But many assemblies are still carrying on just like they did in religion. And they are because they're filming it. And they're getting up there with their band and they're singing songs and waving their hands up in the air. And there's bread and a cup and like, what's that about? Are you trying to wake Yahushua up or something? Do you think you lived 4,000 years ago? They used a ram's horn back then. It was for a different reason. It was practical. What are you blowing ram's horns for? What are you fasting? Fasting is about the self, putting off the self. The bad behaviours, the disobedience. It's not about not eating food, unleavened bread, the shofars, building sukkahs and all this stuff. It's religious behaviour, guys. Oh, but it's written in scripture. Yeah, not for you. But of course, year in, year out, most people don't believe what I'm saying. So go another year and do the feasts as you want to do them, the same way you did them last year. Maybe after doing it year after year, Yahushua might tap you on the shoulder and bring these videos up again to you, or remind you of what you've heard and go, what are you still doing that stuff for? You don't need to do that. You've got me. It's just like the Pharisees and like the religious people in Yahushua's time. They didn't want to sit and talk to Yahushua. They wanted to do their song and dance. And the actual Messiah deliverers walking past their building. They're saying to everybody, look, we've got the portal, we've got the ark, which they didn't. And the actual tree of life was walking past outside. Nuts. So this is what the abomination of desolation really is. It's the fakery, the empty shell of human beings and how we parade ourselves. Let's read this. This is fascinating. The abomination of desolation. Isn't that a fantastic photo? I love that. That's brilliant. The abomination of desolation is a phrase from the book of Daniel describing the pagan sacrifices with which the 2nd century BCE Greek king Antiochus IV replaced the twice daily offerings in the Jewish temple, or alternatively the altar on which such offerings were made. The noun abomination means a thing or action that is vile, vicious, or terrible. That's what abomination means. We've talked about it in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, the things that Yahushua considers abomination in his divine laws. What were they? Drinking blood, idolatry, sodomy, anal sex, tree worship, the Asherah, all that sort of thing. Well, this is the abomination of desolation. It's still with us today because abomination means a thing or action that is vile, vicious, or terrible. The word abomination comes from the old French word abomination, meaning horror, repugnance, disgust. The word abomination can also be used to refer to a person or object you find utterly loathsome and repellent. Do you want your behaviour to be like that when you come to the feasts? Do you want your behaviour to be like that on a daily basis? I know I'm centering in on the feast, but this is all day, every day. Do you want your behaviour to be repellent and loathsome to Yahushua? We're supposed to be pleasing him, not someone who he rolls his eyes and sort of, oh, they stink. Can you stand over there? You know, our behaviour stinks. The Hebrew word for desolation, so that was abomination. What does desolation mean? Abomination means disgusting, repellent, vile, vicious. What does desolation mean? It's shaman, meaning to be desolate, appalled, a devastation, a ruin. Daniel 9 tells of the prince who is to come, who shall make the sacrifices and offerings cease, and in their place shall be an abomination that desolates. Interesting. So of course, most of religion think this prince who comes is going to be Ⅎ𝗏𝗃 because it's an abomination, desolation. He causes the feasts and the church services to end. Not at all. This prince who is to come is Yahushua. I believe that. The prince is Yahushua because he makes the sacrifices and offerings cease. In the animal sacrifices in the temple. He makes them cease. The prince who is to come was, of course, Yahushua, prophesied by Daniel. Yahushua's timing was perfect. Always perfect. As he was in the middle of his ministry whilst the Romans ruled Jerusalem. And his fame went global. Interesting. For those who wonder why he came into time when he did, this is why. The Romans, in the middle of ruling, he was in the middle of his ministry whilst the Romans ruled Jerusalem, and his fame went global. The temple had already been devastated without the presence of Yahushua and was full of religious abomination, following man's sense of instruction, man's way. But it was powerless. There was no ark in the temple. It was powerless. It was a fake. It was a rip-off. It was all merely political influence. So here we have Yahuwah in the flesh, ministering to his people that needed a physician for their minds and their bodies. One of the most important parts of his mission involved Yahushua telling his people that temple worship with its sacrifices had failed. Temple worship with its sacrifices had failed. He said, your body is now the temple. Your hearts are the dwelling place, the set apart place of Yahushua. Through the set apart spirit, and he will open a portal in your heart where you can have access with guidance and communication with him as you walk on the words of his divine laws and instructions. Understand that? So the abomination of desolation in today's 21st century is to see the behavior of a human being without the set apart spirit. Because the scripture says, when you see the abomination of desolation, it's right here, sorry. When you see the abomination that lays waste, the abomination of desolation, that lays waste, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, set up, established where it shouldn't be, in the set apart place. Other translations saying the truth. When you see the abomination of desolation established in the set apart place, what's the set apart place? We are the set apart place. So what is the abomination that's within us? What is the abomination? The abomination of desolation in today's 21st century is to see the behavior of a human being without the set apart spirit. Because that was the whole purpose of Yahushua coming. To fling open the doors of death, to conquer death. So connect the dimensions again. How did he connect them? Through his blood on our hearts. So to see a human being without that connection, that's an abomination. That is Ⅎ𝕗𝕗𝑆's work at play, to divide and conquer mankind and keep them away from Yahushua. In 2 Timothy 3, our behaviour, that was 2 Timothy 3, our behaviour is our sacrifice on the altar of our hearts. Our behaviour is our sacrifice on the altar of our hearts. But mankind without Yahushua's Spirit is exactly as it is described above, an abomination. Utterly loathsome and repellent. This is how Yahushua sees those who refuse divine law for their own ways. Just like animals, just an empty shell. Mankind without divine law, mankind without Yahushua's Spirit, his Ruach. So when you see the abomination that lays waste, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, set up where it shouldn't be, wake up and understand. What a terrible shame. The beautiful creation of Yahushua. What a terrible shame. The beautiful creation of Yahushua, mankind, created in love, standing before him, corrupted and loathsome, defying divine law and full of hatred for Yahushua, as if they could conquer him. What a dreadful shame. Can you see that? This is where the abomination of desolation is, in the hearts of men and women that have been conquered, that don't have that spark of life. Remember a few episodes ago we talked about the two types of life you can have. We can live a normal, fleshly, empty, carnal existence, living and relating just like every other beast of the field, possessed, taken over, and controlled by the fleshly lusts, emotions and passions of the self. Or we can be connected to the tree of life through the portal of life and live by a higher calling. Those who are going for the first resurrection live by a higher calling. So, can you understand this? We don't want the abomination of desolation. We don't want to be an abomination, a reviled, vile, hideous creature to Yahushua. We want him to look on us favourably in love. So let's tie this in to the feast, because that was what Moses was talking about. But this relates to every day of our life, guys. You've got to be listening and doing, reading, listening, doing, reading, listening and doing. If you only read and you don't read in context and you don't listen to his voice while you're reading it, it's just liturgy. Oh, I've read my 3 chapters today and I'm going on to brush my teeth. You know, it's just something you mark on your calendar, but you know, it's not real. You know, he gives you a word to look it up, you know. So, but regarding the feasts, Yahushua is so sick and tired of his cherished bride behaving like religion does at his set apart, anointed, appointed times. They are moedim, meaning something phenomenal will always happen in the right place at the right time. Time and space, as I mentioned before. The portal connection, relationship and sincere, truthful behaviour is paramount in pleasing Yahushua at his feasts, whether you're alone or with a few friends who love Yahushua too. It's all about sincerity and truth. Scripture says that. Hiding behind the original shadows listed in the scriptures, rituals that Yahushua has now transformed and breathed life into, is not only immature and childish, but if a believer stays in this place and refuses to grow and move on down the path, this behaviour is revolting to him, to Yahushua, resembling the dead liturgy and catechism performed in countless steeples and synagogues around the world by people without the portal of life. So Yahushua understands when we come out of religion. He understands we're on a pathway out. So don't hear me judging anybody. I mean, I can see out of my eyes things that people do online and they're at their assemblies, and I go, thank goodness I don't have to do that anymore, and thank goodness I can see. But I'm not judging them because it's been 20 odd years since we started this path, and we did all the same things, you know. It takes years to come out of it, but I want to get these videos out so I can say to people, look, you know, whether you're ready to hear this or not, you don't got to do that stuff. You don't got to do that stuff. Yeah? Yahusha is portal, connection, word, voice, sincerity, truth, you know, which is wonderful if you don't have any believers around you who know Yahusha. You don't have to feel like there's something wrong with you. You don't have to feel like you're alone, because this is how the emissaries felt. A lot of them, when they were sent out into the world, they didn't have anybody to talk to. That's why some of them wrote letters. But you see what I'm saying? So while we may cling on to certain rituals when we're coming out, if we don't move on, if we don't wake up, if you hear these videos and you just dismiss them, stupid guy, stupid Aussie dickhead, stupid haircut, you know, I'm not doing that, that's stupid. You know, without even entertaining the thought, without even thinking, maybe there's some truth in this. I don't care what you think about me, but what about the truth here? It's amazing, you know? If you don't move on, then this immature behaviour, which we've all been, becomes revolting. You're wandering around in the sheep dung, in the same pen, sheep pen, over and over again, walking all the wee and poo all over you. It's dead liturgy and catechism performed in countless steeples and synagogues around the world by people without the portal of life. Oh, but they don't use the name Yahusha. So what? You're still behaving the same way. You go out onto your balcony and blow a shofar, and the guy across the road is a Jewish person. Guy over there who's a Christian, they're blowing and making noise. How are you any different to the street? They just think you're all a bunch of religious whackheads, you know? I'm talking about behaviour. What's the point of having any kind of truth if it's not shown in your behaviour? Shut the hell up, go inside and celebrate within yourselves, you know? Like, mind your business, stop making an eyesore, going out there trying to convert the world. Yahusha knows how to do that. Ridiculous. I'm not going to get worked up. So, they're all religious liturgy. But Yahusha's bride is connected to the vine, the tree of life, and his everlasting words of life sustained her as she navigates her way through the darkness and pressure of this world. Are you listening? Are you behaving? You behaving in abomination at the appointed times? Are you behaving in abomination at the appointed times? By blowing shofars, fasting, building sukkahs, eating unleavened bread, lamb, the bread and the cup, all that stuff, tzedahs and all this nonsense. It's written in scripture. Not for you, it's not. Are you doing all this stuff? Because if you hear it and understand it, but don't move on now that I'm telling you this, your behaviour becomes stale, stagnant, dead, an abomination. Yeah? So that's all I want to talk about today. But it's not just about the feasts. It's about all day, every day. If you don't do what Yahusha tells you to do, you know, what are you doing? Just carrying on in the way of life, like here. Living a normal, fleshly, empty, carnal existence, eating, sleeping, pooping, you know, loving, hating, arguing, you know, working, sleeping, doing everything else. You're just living a normal existence. Do you want to hear his voice and be lifted out of that more and more and more? Well, you have the opportunity to. You know, it's not, you know, you don't, your walk's not mine and my walk's not yours. You know, you've got to feel it and go on your training plan with Yahusha in your life, step by step, walking on his word, arresting your thoughts. That's what it's all about. The thought life, your inner thought life. Yeah? This is a real experience, guys. That's why many people fall away. They want to keep their bad habits, and those bad habits are disobedience. And because of a lack of love, because of a rise in disobedience, I should say, love goes cold. You know, love goes cold, hearts go hard, people fall away. You know, and it's sad. This is the abomination of desolation that has been established on the set apart place. This set apart place is just an empty shell abomination in most people that walk this earth. Very few of us walking around incognito, I might add, have the spark lit, have the portal connected, have the ruach within us, the spark of life, you know. So that's just another very complicated religious doctrine that's just been made simple by the word of Yahusha. The abomination of desolation is not a hard thing to understand. Abomination means loathsome, hateful, disgusting thing. And desolation means ruin, you know, something that ruins everything, and Satan's done that. That's enough prattling from me today. The feasts are coming up in a month or so, and I'll bring all this up again like we do every year at every feast, because Yahusha's bride has to be set free. You don't have to travel and find people and then get there and go, oh, I don't even know you people. I don't really believe what you believe, but we have to come together. No, you don't. You don't have to come together. Who's going to judge you? Who is there? What authority do you answer to? You know? What teacher, preacher, pastor, rabbi is going to rouse on you? You didn't come to the feast. Oh, get stuffed. Get stuffed.